we reconvene for the inaugural event of the Kenyan IIT. I'm Kamya, one of the coordinators of the workshop, teaching assistant at the fiction workshop, and your compeer for the evening. I have participated in these workshops organized by Kenyan Review at Gambier, Ohio, twice since 2017, and I've also had the wonderful opportunity to be part of the blossoming Kenyan IIM community since 2018. In India and indeed anywhere, writing can be a lonely and isolated affair where people receive little to no input that can help them get better at their craft. The Kenyan IITM writing workshops are the result of a long-term collaborative effort between Kenyon College and IIT Madras to provide resources, support, and community to those who write. We are happy that the workshop is now in its third year of running since its inception in 2018, growing steadily in popularity. Running in 3 genres, science writing, fiction, and non-fiction, the workshop has a lot to offer for the aspiring writer, researcher, or really anyone invested in writing as an open-ended process of discovery. It is focused on providing an immersive, hands-on environment where participants engage in prompt-based writing on a daily basis. This generative aspect is a standout feature of the Kenyan IITM writing workshops, unlike other workshops that work on fine-tuning previously written pieces or entail theoretical discussions on craft. Though the workshop is the result of the coordinated and untiring efforts of many, I would like to name and thank a few. From the Kenyan end, Professor Sean Decatur, President Kenyon College, Professor Wendy Singer, Professor David Lin. From the IIT Madras side, many thanks to Professor Bhaskar Ramamurthy, Director IIT Madras, Professor Raghunathan Rangaswamy, Professor Setupati and Professor Sriram Kumar, Professor Umakant Dash, and Professor Arun Narasimhan. Most especially, my sincere thanks to the instructors who are the heart and soul of the workshop, Nancy Zafras for fiction, Geeta Kothari for non-fiction, Chris Gillen, Robert Mauk, Geeta Iyer, and Yutan Getzler for science writing. A special shout out to Ms. Ujjwala Koti, coordinator of the Siddhi webinar series, Ms. Suguna and Mr. Shashi Kumar, who have formed the technical backbone of the workshop. And in case I have been remiss in mentioning someone, I'm hoping that Professor Sudarshan will pick up the slack in his vote of thanks. This year, due to the constraints of a global pandemic, the Kenyan IITM workshop has moved online. We have redesigned the experience to create the same sense of community online that animates the workshop when in person. I would now like to invite Professor Wendy Singer, Roy Wortman Distinguished Professor of History at Kenyon College, to introduce the workshop. A few words about Wendy before I hand over to her. Wendy's pioneering past work placed a spotlight on the vital role played by oral narratives in the field of history. Today, this is considered commonsensical and even par for the course in the discipline, thanks to the efforts of scholars such as Wendy. Over to her now.
Thank you. Thank you, Kamya. Welcome to this wonderful global experiment. I say experiment consciously to a screen full of so many scientists because I mean it in the dynamic way of hard, creative work and the benefit that comes from replication. For 3 years now, we have been embarked, Kenyon and IIT Madras, on this project to teach writing across continents, across cultures, and across disciplines. Each time we find new ways to take this engagement to a higher level. This time we've adjusted to the challenges of COVID-19 world and are teaching online. Professor Sudarshan Padmanabhan, as you must all know, is one of the most energetic and creative scholars, teachers, administrators, and collaborators. He and I began working on this project with a germ of an idea 8 years ago when I was carrying out research in Chennai on a Fulbright Nehru Fellowship about the history of the Madras Municipal Council. I'm a historian of India, as Kamya mentioned earlier, and I'm known most for the work that I've done in Bihar and the history of Indian elections. I came to Chennai because I knew the study of Indian history required North-South coordination. And to IIT Madras because Professor Sudarshan invited me after he had taught for a year or two at Kenyon College some years ago. I lived in Mylapore, and my daughter, then 15, attended the Sri Shankara school in Adyar. In fact, it was at the Sri Shankara school where I had the honor of hearing a speech by Director Ramamurthy about IIT's commitment not only to engineering, but to the role of the humanities in training engineers. From that moment, it seemed almost inevitable that Kenyon, a renowned liberal arts college, and IIT Madras, an internationally recognized institute of technology, should deepen their engagement. And writing, what Kenyon is known for, was the ideal vehicle. Since then, several IIT Madras faculty and students have visited Kenyon for writing workshops, and Kenyon faculty and a student have come to IIT Madras. I therefore want to thank Director Professor Bhaskar Ramamurthy, Professor Karthik Raman, and Dean Professor Raghunathan Rangaswamy for their support. And of course, thank Professor Sudarshan and his team who have done heroic work putting this workshop together. Now it is my pleasure to introduce to you Professor Sean Decatur, President of Kenyon College. President Decatur is himself a scientist, an award-winning biophysical chemist who understands the benefits of our bridging the worlds of science and art. He has been long dedicated to sharing the principles embodied in the Kenyon and IITM collaboration, promotion of the sciences and scientific writing, a celebration of the liberal arts and humanities, and a deep commitment to international partnerships in education. Kenyon has been especially fortunate for President Decatur's leadership since his inauguration in 2013, and we benefit from his advocacy of a broad engagement with the world. Indeed, as I'm sure he will mention, he visited IIT Madras last March. As the COVID-19 crisis has disrupted so much of our physical connectedness, he has in every way reaffirmed, including in a blog post last summer, how Kenyon deeply values the perspectives and contributions of our international community. And certainly, as this joint effort shows, IIT Madras has become part of our international community. President Decatur.
Thank you, Professor Singer, and thanks to all of you who are joining in today's panel and also participating in this workshop, which is just very exciting. I'd like to begin actually by thanking Professor Arun Narasimhan for that really spectacular talk a little while ago that I think in some ways captured a lot of my thoughts incredibly well. And that's the notion that clear and powerful and persuasive writing is just critical to the work of science and engineering in all capacities. It's critical to advance the work itself, to make sure that scientists are able to effectively communicate to other scientists. It's critical for students and scholars and researchers in order to advance careers in science. But it's also, and maybe most importantly, critical to advance the broader public understanding of science. And our experience globally with the COVID-19 pandemic has underscored the importance of clear communication, effective communication of science and technology to both broaden public understanding and how that's connected to the health and safety of the global community, but also important for advancing the progress of the science itself. So this workshop is really, I think, goes to the heart of one of the most important challenges that we face today. How do we actually get better communication, improve the communication that happens in science and in engineering? And so I am delighted that Kenyon and IIT Madras have been partnering on workshops in science and writing for now 3 years, as this is the third offering of this. And to me, This collaboration is an example of how global engagement can be impactful for students and faculty and can lead to tangible impact on the broader world. Now, I have long admired and respected IIT Madras and its reputation for excellence in technological innovation. Over the years in my career as a scientist, I have known many colleagues who have studied or taught at IIT Madras. And as Professor Singer mentioned, I really enjoyed my visit to Chennai and to the IIT Madras campus back in March. And in fact, that was my last trip outside of the state of Ohio before the pandemic hit. And it was really a delight to be able to see the beautiful campus, to meet many of the faculty there, and to get a firsthand sense of what the IIT Madras campus and experience is like. So, I'm really grateful that we've been able to make the pivot to having an in-person collaborative workshop to doing something online in this format. And I hope that all of you enjoy and get a great deal out of this experience. And I'd like to just lend my thanks to Director Ramamurthy for the support for this workshop and for this collaboration. To Dean Raghavswamy and the staff and support from the Global Engagement Group at IIT Madras for this. And of course, also thank Professor Sudarshan Paramadamban and the work with Professor Singer, I think, in the combination of the energy and determination that both of you have had to make sure that this collaboration continues and continues even under the current challenging circumstances is something for which I am very grateful. And of course, also to my colleagues from Kenyan who are joining in and participating in this workshop, as well as colleagues from IIT Madras who are also helping to organize and lead the workshops over the course of the next couple of days. So thank you very much. And I am looking forward to hearing some of the products of this workshop later on this week. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Professor Decatur. Your encouragement and support have been vital to the growth of the workshop. I now invite Professor Bhaskar Ramamurthy, Director, IIT Madras, to say a few words.
Professor Bhaskar, your mic is mute.
So greetings to, thank you very much, Dr. Kamya, and my greetings to Professor Decatur and Professor Singer, my colleagues on the Professor Padmanabhan, Raghurangaswamy, and I don't know whether Arun Narasimhan is still on the in the program.
I'm here.
Yeah, very good. So greetings to all of you. I'm pleased to be, a part of this this workshop of the Kenyan IIT Madras workshop this year too, though it's happening in a virtual mode. What I wanted to share in this brief interjection is this, that we have a lot of partnerships with universities, as you would guess, across the world, many heavy hitters in science and engineering and technology. But really, this is unique, what we have with Kenyon College and on writing. Right? I wish it was not just writing in science and just writing in general, but it's hard enough for us first getting our students and us and many of us, to be able to be minimally competent in writing proper texts and tracts in science and engineering. I believe that with the kind of focus we have had in India in the last 3 decades or even longer on STEM, even particularly in the the better schools, writing is clear thinking. I would say clear thinking to express one's thoughts and writing has really suffered. And this shows up in many ways. I'll just narrate two sort of very common, one very common occurrence and one incident which happened several years ago. Common occurrence is that very often in our research groups, people work together and then there's some issue or the other, regarding the work or regarding the work environment or whatever. And some of this, one of the students will come to you and tell you, try to tell you what the issue is. And it happens more than once, and quite often that after the person speaks for about a minute or so, you have to stop the person and say, look, all I'm able to understand from what you've been telling me is that someone said something to somebody somewhere. I'm not able to get anything beyond that. There's so much vagueness in what you're trying to say. And so they're not able, many of us are not able to collect our thoughts and express ourselves precisely, succinctly, and in a logical train. And this reflects in the writing when time comes to write up one's work. I remember there was a student who did very good work. He had completely trained, in school and his undergraduate education in one of the Indian languages, and quite understandably was struggling in English. His supervisor, when time came to write his thesis, his supervisor was getting very frustrated with him because he was not making much progress. And, he kept blaming the scholar kept blaming it on his English. And finally, the supervisor fortunately also knew that his language, Hindi, very well. So he said, look, I don't, just write your thesis in English and Hindi and give it to me. Once we get it right in Hindi, the English part is easy. And it turned out that actually that was, the language is not the problem. He couldn't collect his thoughts together to write in Hindi either. So this is something we are grappling with. In fact, I would say we have a problem at scale, meaning a large number of our students, and particularly our scholars, research scholars, struggle with expressing themselves. And one of the things I look forward to from our faculty as we go through these workshops is how do we take learnings from these workshops and try to address some of these gaps in our students' training at scale, meaning we have to deal with, we take in a few hundred research scholars a year. So we're trying to we have to address that. And then maybe even some of the other postgraduate scholars and even some of the undergraduates, we're talking about, maybe 1,000 of them. How do you address and fill up this gap in their training at scale? This is an interesting challenge for us. And it's, as I just pointed out with the help of that anecdote, is that it's not an English issue. It's more than an English issue, and it shows up in English because our medium of communication in the higher education in India, in institutes like IIT, is English. So I really look forward to. I've been hearing great things about these workshops from my colleagues, and I look forward to, learnings from these, enabling us to, address this challenge that we face at scale. So thank you very much. And I wish, though we are doing this in the virtual mode, I think we've all learned that a lot can be achieved in this mode, even if it doesn't have the warmth and, the sort of the special charm of a face-to-face meeting. But nevertheless, we can get a lot done. I don't think we can do this forever, but at least for some time, this is a reasonable substitute. So I wish all the participants all the very best, and I hope this workshop is really, something that changes the way the participants, think and write. And I hope that it is rewarding to all the resource persons, the teachers and the professors who are going to, contribute to this workshop. And I look forward to meeting some of you, at the next available opportunity when we are all able to travel much more freely across the globe. Thank you. And since I may not meet you again before the new year starts, wish you all a very happy Christmas and New Year. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Professor Ramamurthy. You very succinctly identified the problem, and we hope that the workshops can go a distance towards addressing it. I now invite Professor David Lin, Special Assistant to the President and Editor Emeritus of Kenyon Review, to speak. A few words about David. David is an accomplished writer and teacher, author of several anthologies, and winner of the 2016 O. Henry Award for his work Divergence. Whether it is helming the Kenyon Review Writers Workshops at Gambier or teaching R.K. Narayan inside a workshop, David's dry wit and humor are a joy to behold. Over to you now, David.
Thank you, Dr. Kamia. It's a great pleasure to be here, and the I'm only sorry not to be enjoying the pleasures of the IITM campus and the food of Chennai, but we look forward to being there next year. Good evening, and to you all again, welcome. I'm deeply gratified that Kenyon College is collaborating with the Indian Institute of Technology Madras, one of the premier educational institutions in the world, in an innovative program of writing workshops. For over 30 years, Kenyon, a liberal arts institution in Gambier, Ohio, USA, has offered high-quality writing instruction aimed not only at improving the skills of participants, but empowering them to use language precisely, forcefully, and effectively, as is ever more necessary in the modern world. That world, of course, is increasingly global, and although Kenyon is a small liberal arts college, it is committed to reaching out to the international academic community and has also attracted many students and faculty colleagues to visit Gambier. I'm especially glad, therefore, that IITM recognizes the importance of offering its students, whether in the humanities, sciences, or engineering, the chance to learn to write more effectively and for non-specialist readers. And the Kenyon workshops are a singularly important means to accomplish this. Indeed, as you've already heard, for the past 2 years, IITM has teamed with Kenyon College to offer these signature writing workshops at its magnificent campus in Tamil Nadu. These classes have manifested the Kenyon philosophy that all participants benefit from writing intensively in small groups and in response to creative models and instructor prompts, as well as from then reading their work aloud to each other. The productive responses help them gain insight into their own efforts. This year, responding creatively to the worldwide challenges of the COVID-19 virus, we have adapted our workshop program to virtual classrooms. We strongly believe that these online sessions will be both challenging and inspiring. Indeed, as we anticipate future innovations, online opportunities will surely be a part of our offerings. Once again this year, we are offering workshops in science writing, creative nonfiction, and fiction. Each will be led by gifted instructors who offer models of excellent writing along with daily exercises and the opportunity for participants to develop new skills and strategies. A critical element will be the daily sharing of their work with each other in order to better understand the effectiveness of their own efforts and to identify opportunities for revision. So again, welcome. I'm so honored to be part of this inaugural event and to welcome you to this remarkable endeavor. The week ahead promises to be extraordinary.
Thanks very much, David. I now invite Professor Raghunathan Rangaswamy, Dean Global Engagement at IIT Madras, to say a few words. The Office of Global Engagement, under his mentorship and support, has risen to the challenges of organizing this workshop in a pandemic. It is no exaggeration to say that the workshop simply could not have happened this year without their support. Over to you now, Professor.
Thank you, Dr. Kamya, and I welcome all of you from Kenyon College. Professor Sean, I met him briefly when he made his last visit to the campus. And of course, Professor Wendy Singer, I still remember her enthusiasm for the Bihari dialect, I think, that we discussed. And I'm very happy to see everyone here. And I also just want to say, as Sean also mentioned, I thoroughly loved Arun's lecture, and I think the idea of towers of knowledge and towers of leadership was really fantastic to see, and the kind of analogies that you can then use to delineate between scientific writing and science writing and so on. It was really nice, and I think an apt introductory lecture for this workshop. And of course, in this pandemic season and the way things are going, it seems more and more like communication is one of the most important skills that anyone should have. I think particularly technology should have. And as was mentioned, writing clearly about even the pandemic and the vaccine and what you should do and what you should not do. is a skill I think all of us need to learn. And, it's becoming even more important with of course, people in the US are very familiar with this, with all this disinformation, facts and non-facts and so on. So I think communication is going to become a key skill that we should all have. And of course, pithy communication is even more important, it seems like, because I think we have to figure out how to write in Twitter to reach a large number of people. So in all sense, there are challenges in communication. And I think learning to write effectively, learning to write so that people believe you, all of these are important skills. And I think we are really happy that our students here at IIT Madras have an opportunity to participate in such a world-class program here. We thank all of you for taking your time and sharing your knowledge with the participants. And I welcome you, and I hope this workshop is a grand success. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Professor Raghunathan. We have now come to one of my favorite aspects of the Kenyan IIT workshop, the public readings. Nancy Zafris has graciously agreed to go first. Author of The Home Jar and other such anthologies, Nancy is the recipient of numerous awards and grants. Is the former fiction editor of the Kenyan Review and the series editor for the Flannery O'Connor Award for short fiction. Nancy is a force to reckon with and also one of my favorite people in the world. So over to Nancy now.
Thank you, Kamya. I feel very lucky to have Kamya as co-teacher in our fiction class, and I'm looking forward to it. So this is a shortened chapter from a novel. In this chapter, a Japanese high school student named Chieko has returned to Japan after a year as an exchange student in America. Soon after she arrives, an earthquake hits and brings in tidal waves. The tidal wave came in with a yawn in the rural community where Chieko had returned home, a minor celebrity with her American-sounding English that was more slurs and mumbles than fluency. It proved useless back in the Japanese school system she hated so much, where the English they studied remained as incomprehensible as ever. A year in America and not a bit of improvement in the tests they forced her to take. She rode her bike home on from Saturday study, head lost in dark thoughts. She was close to being outed as the same old dim-witted Chieko by the mean girls in her class. Although she knew her friend Kimi-chan would stand by her, she missed the American friend she had come to love so much. She wasn't thinking about the earthquake on the bike ride home. The major damage had already occurred much farther north on the island boot of Hokkaido. When one of the dying tidal waves traveled south and intruded into the countryside of her own village, she barely noticed. It seemed such a minor thing. The seawater lazed ashore. The ocean's ebbing rhythms washed it backward. For a moment, the water retreated, then calmly advanced. Chieko watched from atop a hill as cars on a bridge came to a stop. Celebrating guests returning from a wedding got out and gathered at the railing to watch. There appeared to be no danger of the water lurching upward. The earthquake was over. The aftershocks were over. And this little tidal wave had turned into a sightseeing opportunity. Finally, Chieko thought, finally to see a tidal wave, this legendary creature their country was taught to fear, finally to see it in person. It was not at all what she imagined, not at all like the famous woodblock prints where blue waves rose with hungry white froths like tiger claws. Still, the undercurrent began to weaken the stanchions of the bridge. The bridge began to sway. One end tilted. As the bridge surrendered into a slide, the shocked wedding guests were in danger of being poured into the water. An old woman in a black kimono was grabbed by a rescuing hand. The last person was not so lucky, and the unlucky woman fell into the water just as escape was within another step's reach. Another step she could have made had it not been for the pinched gait forced by her chrysanthemum-painted kimono. She slipped in the water gently, and gently she was carried along. The woman did not appear to struggle. She bobbed lightly in the water, a flower. A good strategy, Chieko thought, until she realized the body was lifeless. Chieko stood with her bicycle, watching the scene as it transpired below. It was already too late for her to take the shortest route downward. The hill's trough was filling with seawater. She had delayed too long. Her friend Kimi-chan, on the other hand, Kimi-chan had not hesitated. She had immediately powered the bicycle straight downhill, outracing the oncoming water, her strong soccer legs shooting her upward into the secure hills. The people on the bridge were waving as they ran. They were screaming at Chieko to get on her bicycle. They are waving at me, she heard herself say. Watanabe Chieko, third child and only daughter. For a moment, she was not so sad. A sadness had been drowning her. She had not realized it until now. She called out to the American friends she loved so much. Chieko adored that English word love. She said it all the time and drew hearts that said love, love, love. She loved her friends, but could not say she loved Amos, the American boy who had given her rides on his horses, although what they did must have been love. She touched the spot that had not yet grown, the child inside her, but she could not find its life along the flatness of her stomach. The valley troughs were filling quickly. The water was not yet dirty, Chieko noticed. So new was it to this green land. It had not had time to find the dirt underneath. Fly, someone screamed. In the puddle of a valley flared something golden. She jumped on her bike and rode toward the glowing beacon. Fly, screamed the voice again. Thank you.
Much, Nancy. Our next reader is Geeta Kothari. Geeta Kothari is the non-fiction editor of the Kenyan Review and director of the Writing Center at the University of Pittsburgh. Her essay, If You Are What You Eat, Then What Am I, is to me a perfect example of the infinite possibilities of the non-fiction genre. I make it a point to read this essay at least once every year. Over to you now, Geeta.
Thanks, Kamya. I'm going to read part of a book I've been working on for what feels like forever. It's a section from the early part of the book, which is called Crossing Black Water. It's a memoir about my mother and me. Even now, 15 years after my mother's death, I think of her in motion, boarding an airplane, walking 3 steps ahead of my sister Mira and me on our way to school, rushing to catch the bus she took to work. At home, she practiced yoga or Tai Chi in the living room while Dad watched TV. When she sat down to knit, her hands moved quickly, a fluid motion neither Mira nor I can replicate. The only time I remember her slowing down was weekend afternoons when she lay on the floor of her bedroom to soak up the afternoon sun. She flipped her braids above her head and dozed until one of us woke her for tea. I wish I could have told her I loved her, but when I needed them most, words failed me. We were not a family of easy I love yous. I think Mom told me she missed me only once towards the end of her life, before we knew it was the end, but at a moment that was fraught and ugly rather than loving and tender. No Hallmark movie ending for us. Not that Mom would have wanted this. Such phrases were American, superficial and meaningless, unnecessary for us because they stated the obvious. Of course we loved each other. Of course she and my father missed us when Mira and I were away in boarding school. We were a family. And if my last words to her had been, I love you, would she have said, as she had in the past, what is this I love you business? What do people mean? Perhaps better to say stay and bridge the distance between us, her in a hospital bed in New Delhi, me at home in Pittsburgh. I can't hear you, Mom, I said. We were on the phone. I sat at my dining room table with the Sunday Times spread out before me. The brass chandelier above the table filled the room with a warm light. Outside, the February sky was overcast and it looked more like dusk than early morning. Winter had been brutal. Icicles hung from our gutters and the sun had become a memory. At least Mom was missing this, I told myself, though she never complained about the cold. My mother, Manorama Katari Ne Sood, had been in the hospital for 2 weeks. Her voice sounded like she was speaking through a wool scarf wrapped around her face, and the line crackled as if this were 1964, not 2004. "Oh, Mom," I said, "I've forgotten everything I want to tell you." Definitely not a hallmark moment. I had spent years tutoring students for whom English is a second language. I taught creative writing, and I wrote, if not to make a living, then in order to live. I am the descendant of an opium trader known for his beautiful English handwriting, the granddaughter of an English professor, the daughter of a woman known for her facility with language, a woman who had spent her professional life editing and rewriting other people's words. And I failed to find one single meaningful thing to say to my mother in what would be her last hours. A generous reader might blame the situation. After all, what kind of life prepares you for this moment? Your mother 6,000 miles away, recovering from a surgery she didn't want. But the only improbable thing in this situation was me in Pittsburgh instead of New York, where in 1961, my parents had, improbably, met and married, and where my sister and I were raised less than a mile from the United Nations, where my mother worked. I'd been in Pittsburgh for 15 years, and my parents still wondered when I'd come home. When did my grandparents stop waiting for my mother to return home? My parents had lived their entire professional lives in New York with frequent return trips to India. Once they planned to retire back home, as they called it. Instead, they returned every year, and this year Mom had gone ahead so that she could spend 2 months alone with the extended Sooth family. Her family, not Dad's, who lived in Bombay and who merited a brief obligatory visit on her way to Delhi. But 6 weeks into her family trip, Mom found herself in a private room in a hospital. She'd had an operation to remove an intestinal obstruction. My father flew to Delhi the day of her surgery, and now 2 weeks later, he sat next to her while she tried to tell me something on the phone. Finally, he took the receiver from her. "What's wrong?" I asked. "Why can't she speak?" Thank you.
Thanks so much, Geeta. Our next reader, Chris Gillen, is Professor of Biology at Kenyon College and Director of Kenyon's Creative Science Writing Program. His workshops at IIT Madras have been widely popular in the past, often producing some standout examples of writing science for popular audiences. Over to you now, Chris.
Thank you, Dr. Kamya. I'm going to read a couple of short pieces. The first is a summary of a recent research proposal. To be alive is to cultivate an internal environment different than the external. For cells, this regulation requires moving molecules across plasma membranes, the boundaries between inside and out. Salts and sugars cross this barrier through membrane transport proteins. These proteins fall into two categories, channels and carriers, that differ in structure and mechanism. For example, channels and carriers vary in the electrical consequences of their activity. Channels are often electrogenic. They carry charged molecules across the membrane, generating a current. Carriers, on the other hand, can be electroneutral if they simultaneously carry positive and negative charge. My research group, with collaborators at The Ohio State University and the Mayo Clinic, studies a group of carriers called the cation chloride cotransporters, CCCs. CCCs regulate cell volume and intracellular chloride. Most proteins in this family couple movement of chloride ions, which have negative charge, to sodium ions, which have positive charge, resulting in electroneutral transport. Because of this electroneutrality, CCCs transport ions without altering the electrical property of cells. Recently, we have characterized CCCs from mosquitoes and fruit flies. Surprisingly, they conduct electrogenic transport of sodium without simultaneous movement of chloride. In other words, these proteins behave more like channels than carriers. The fly and mosquito proteins differ only slightly in structure from electroneutral CCCs. We propose to investigate which structural differences are responsible for the shift between electroneutral and electrogenic transport. By comparing proteins with similar structures but different functions, we will uncover new structure-function properties of the CCCs. So I'm fairly comfortable reading something like that. But now I'm going to do something that I'm not comfortable doing, and that is reading two poems. And these are based upon articles in recent articles in Science magazine. Enteric flora. Colonocytes inhabit different territory than sunflowers, an incomparable terrain where, unlike leaves and only superficially like petals, their microvilli deplete nearby niches of oxygen, thus nurturing, in a way curiously familiar to flowers, a community, except not of hungry butterflies, but of anaerobic bacteria that outcompete the ones that cause disease, and convey to us a habitat where we might muse not blossoms, but how they grow mutually with bees, and not gut cells, but how they evolve with microbes into an ecosystem of immunity. So that's based on a Science magazine article called Colonocyte Metabolism Shapes the Gut Microbiota. And this last short poem is based on a Science magazine article called Rhomboid Distorts Lipids to Break the Viscosity Imposed Speed Limit of Membrane Diffusion. Intro. Call me not intramembrane. Sorry, let me start again. Intro. Call me not intramembrane cleaving protease, but I-clip, or rhomboid with irregular fold, aligned awkwardly into the overcrowded viscous crust, haloed like a merganser in a dense raft of ducts, unquenchable, not fully hydrophobic, like an icebreaker disrupting the frozen future, diffusing faster than your equations conjecture. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Dr. Chris. I am delighted to welcome for the first time Geeta Iyer, our next reader. Geeta Iyer is the Mellon Science Writing Fellow at Kenyon College for 2020-22. She has a multidisciplinary background in the arts and sciences and writes fiction, poetry, and nonfiction, which is grounded in natural sciences research. She also has an interest in eco-criticism and migration and displacement narratives. We would love to hear from you, Geeta.
Hi, thank you so much for having me here. I'm going to read 3 poems just now. They are all about loss of language and culture and how we rebuild those against the backdrop of extinction. The first one is kasap, that which is bitter. Punto, avoid poison. I know you would like to pain your tongue with butterfly wing, the orange, red, black, white wafer. You open your mouth for monarchs. Watch the birds. They will teach you to spit. They learned not everything big and beautiful may be consumed. Remember when you first put warty gourd in your mouth, how it shattered your tongue, how you complained, kasakirde, how the gourd bled, kasipit, never again. Also remember Amama's smile, a snaggletooth so large that when she closed her mouth, it looked like knuckle fruit punching through her lips. She ate warty gourd every way she could, mashed, fried, stewed, curried, raw. She said it was kashayam, but she thought it was amridam. Perhaps it was because she was 50 and I only 5, but I never understood what she meant when she said medicine would only turn into honey if you learned how to crave it. Contrapunto, collect poison. I know you would like to be monarch, fly from Mexico to Canada and back again. You cannot do it in a lifetime. Plant your children on milkweed to fatten upon that sap, so their bodies conjure the ghosts of medicine wings. So when they dry their newborn wings that say, "Eat me" outside and "do not" inside, others will read and listen. This next poem is called Scarce Resources. It's set in Panama, where I am. I have been thinking about amphibians the way others think about fortunes. The cost of storing sperm in a vat of nitrogen, the cost of lighting, casing, ventilation, labor. The woman who raises a swarm of fruit flies dusts them in nutritional supplements. The value of a toad in a tank that refuses to lay. Maybe she wasn't feeling it. Maybe tomorrow, as that woman who minds the amphibian tranks crunches the season's dry leaves underfoot, she'll sicken of her commute. Low pay and stubborn animals. She doesn't see enough of her children, worries what they haven't learned in school. It is for her that guayacan trees burst into bloom. Their amarillo brillante punctures months of drought like the silk-strung suns of orb weaver webs. Wealthy men, artists, harvested the labor of Madagascans, made them milk gold from such spiders, spin threads, and weave a mantle they draped over the shoulders of a woman pale as baby's breath. My grandmother's saris were shot with gold threads. My mother's silver plated, mine plastic treated to shine, so scarce are the veins under earth. I think of the coats some toads wear, signaling fitness, the coming of storms, sex, biohazard toxins, prospectors, fortunes. They're extinct in the wild, those ranas doradas. After the harvest, we shall need new myths. A woman returns to her children in the dark, kisses the brown of their foreheads, whispers that they must study hard, become economists. But stop, she adds, to praise the brief sunbursts of guayacanes before their flowers fall, lest the rains do not follow, lest your hearts compress to mere nuggets within your chests. And the third poem is titled Meaningful Symbols Placed in Meaningful Places. Oh, sorry. I'm sorry. Just back. Okay. I woke up this morning to tell you there may be caves on every continent marked with ochre and blood and calcium, that we have never been so alone as to be alien in expressions of love. It has never been a mystery why a child would trace her hand upon paper any more than any vertebrate that shivers would turn its face to the sun. Maybe to be alive today is too much, to choke upon the lies so many people serve in lieu of common dignity. But to be alive has always meant waking up, facing sunward, repeating to those we love the truths that will outlive us. I woke up this morning to tell you Neanderthals made art in caves in as yet undiscovered places. Surely all our common ancestors made art in leaves, art in hair, in song and other intangibles. I woke up because our lives are holy with such truths as cell division, rock formation, mental maps that leave their traces in uranium-thorium decay. I wake up in such good company, knowing we were never the first and won't be the last to turn the fact of sunlight into symbol, symbol into body language, movement of bodies against other bodies into such sciences, such memories, into such blinding hopes. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Geeta. It was really a pleasure listening to you. I'm also delighted to welcome for the first time Professor Robert Mauck. Robert Mauck is Professor of Biology at Kenyon College with an interest in animal behavior and physiological ecology. We hope that you will be with us for a very long time in the years to come. And over to you now, Professor Robert.
Thank you. Alas, I have no poetry, but I do have something from a scientific paper. It's from the introduction of a recent paper in Global Change Biology. The salient feature of anthropogenic climate change over the last century has been the rise in global mean temperature. This change has accelerated since the 1950s. When viewed as a whole, the effects of rising global temperatures on the natural world have been profound. However, direct evidence for these effects on biological systems is generally based on regional or local measures of temperature. Global mean temperature itself generally does not appear as an independent variable in these studies, perhaps because the signal to noise ratio of this gross measure makes its effect difficult to detect in any but the longest of data sets. Global temperature is an index of an entire planet's worth of interactions. It is the great integrator. As such, it may explain more variation in the response of natural populations to climate change than do more proximate measures, particularly for animals that move over large spatial scales. Annual global mean temperature, AGMT, is a single broad brush metric that has risen by more than 0.6 degrees C since 1950. AGMT is derived from a combination of marine and terrestrial temperatures. Both air and sea temperatures around the world have risen in parallel with global temperature, though the correlations between air, sea, and global temperatures are not perfect and vary around the globe. Local climate at any particular place and time may not be in sync with the global mean. For organisms with restricted movement patterns, such as flowering plants or insects or resident birds, local or regional temperatures may be better predictors of reproductive success than global temperature. Even for migrant species that travel great distances between breeding and wintering sites, local temperatures at either site might best explain reproductive success if the movement within the breeding site is restricted. For cosmopolitan species that travel widely between and within seasons, one can imagine a complex model that integrates precise measures of an individual's location and local temperature for every hour of every day over the course of a year. Even if possible, it is not clear that such a model could capture the conflicting effects of temperature within systems or the myriad combinations of direct and indirect effects across time. AGMT is a single metric that integrates across time and space and therefore may be well suited for examining the effects of climate on species that cover great distances both between and within seasons. Marine vertebrates in general fit this criterion. In addition, a number of marine vertebrate species breed on land and forage at sea, and are thus susceptible to change in both regional sea surface temperatures and local air temperatures. Examples include pinnipeds and sea turtles. But seabirds are the most numerous and widespread vertebrate taxa to straddle both marine and terrestrial ecosystems worldwide. In fact, seabirds are renowned for distances traveled within and between seasons. They forage daily hundreds or thousands of kilometers from their nesting islands, and also make large-scale migrational movements during the non-breeding portion of their annual cycle. Long-term studies of seabirds, therefore, should provide an appropriate condition with which to detect the effect of global temperatures on reproductive success in natural populations. The breeding population of Leach's storm petrels at the Bowdoin Scientific Station at Kent Island in the Bay of Fundy has been monitored with marked individuals since 1955. Storm petrels breed in the North Atlantic after spending the winter in the equatorial Atlantic. These seabirds produce a single egg per year for up to 38 years, and incubating adults travel up to 2,600 kilometers during a single foraging trip. This confluence of a highly mobile vertebrate and a population that has been studied for over half a century provides a rare opportunity to test the hypothesis that global mean temperature may be the best integrator of global climate change and should therefore best predict the relationship between changing climate and reproductive success in natural populations. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Professor Robert. And now we have one who has graciously agreed to be our last reader for the evening. Professor Yutan Getzler is Associate Professor of Chemistry at Kenyon College with an interest in sustainability and recycling, which alongside the Anthropocene and climate change are very hotly debated topics today. So we welcome you to the Kenyan Iitm workshop and we look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you, Dr. Kamya. And I really liked that phrasing of the great integrator. It was nice turn of phrase, Bob. So this is, I'm going to be reading from a paper that I co-authored with Professor Jeffrey Coates that was published this year in Nature Reviews Materials, and the title is Chemical Recycling to Monomer for an Ideal Circular Polymer Economy. Plastics seem to be everywhere. Analyses of soil, water, or biological organisms confirm and amplify that initial impression. Annual growth in global polymer production has consistently outpaced both global gross domestic product and population growth. The properties of strength and durability that make plastics so useful during their functional lifetimes are profound drawbacks at end of life, as these materials are overwhelmingly landfilled or leaked into the environment. The annual loss in value of single-use packaging waste, equating to 47% of polymer waste, is estimated at $80 to $120 billion. This corresponds to 95% of the embedded value. This figure does not include externalized environmental costs. Recovered plastics are either valorized through closed loop and cascade recycling, or more commonly, combusted for energy production. However, most plastics are relegated to a landfill or are leaked into the environment. Living in the Anthropocene, a geologic epoch defined by the unforeseen and unintended consequences of industrial production, we must ask, if at the outset of commodity polymer synthesis, we had known what we know now, how would we have designed our materials differently? The next grand challenge for polymer chemistry is to develop materials that can be efficiently recycled directly into their own starting materials, chemical recycling to monomer, CRM. Polymers produced from recovered monomer feedstock have no loss of properties. Moreover, the process recovers embedded value and mitigates environmental effects. Yet, CRM capability is not sufficient to establish an ideal polymer economy. Polymer performance must meet the demands of diverse applications. The ideal properties of a polymer depend on the intended use. Polyolefins have long constituted the largest segment of the polymer market, consistently amounting to more than half of global primary polymer production and waste. Consequently, the development of materials that serve as polyolefin replacements would have the largest potential economic and environmental impact. In this light, key targets for the next generation of plastics are the thermomechanical properties of polyolefins. These are the properties against which new polymers are first compared in this review. Beyond properties, other aspects of an ideal polymer recycling system include little to no monomer or additive, little to no residual monomer or additive, an accessible pathway for CRM, use of earth-abundant catalysts, and the ability to sustain infinite polymerization depolymerization cycles. Monomer sourcing and cost are intentionally absent from this list. If the material can be easily depolymerized to monomer, higher initial cost may be offset. We begin this review by discussing current polymer end-of-life fates. To understand the thermodynamic and kinetic context of CRM, we then examine the energetics of polymerization and depolymerization. Given the importance of polyolefins, we briefly address their synthesis, properties and challenges to recycling before examining we briefly address their synthesis, properties, and the challenges to recycling before examining examples of polyolefin CRM. Excellent reviews on polymer recycling can be found elsewhere. We do not address the cracking of biopolymers, self-immolative materials, cross-linked materials, or entropy-driven ring-opening polymerization, although all of these could offer productive routes for depolymerization or polymer recycling. Instead, we focus on linear thermoplastics as they constitute the largest portion of polymer production and waste. Thank you for your attention, and I look forward to the rest of the workshop.
So I think it's a time for vote of thanks. I think there is another session after this, so I'll just keep it really short. This is not something ceremonious I'm doing, but actually from the heart, because the support given by Professor Decatur, Professor Singer, and Professor Lin, this year Professor Lin literally pushed it because I was not really sure whether it will happen or not. Then from IIT side, Professor Bhaskar Ramurthy and our new dean, Office of G is a brand new creation by Professor Bhaskar Ramurthy and Professor Karthik. They have been extremely supportive. And without the support of Ujjwala from the GE office and also the dean and Professor Karthik's support, our technical side would not have been possible. Especially they bought the Zoom and then they really worked very hard on this. And so our extended family, our friends, community of friends this year. I met Chris in 2013 when I came to actually discuss this project, Obama Singh initiative with Professor Decatur, on this middle path. So I love the middle path at Kenyon. So I used to really love it. I wish others also have the opportunity to go to Kenyon. So this year, I should actually thank our new entrants, Geeta, Robert, and also Yutan. Hopefully you'll be here next year and enjoy the monkeys and snakes. And I think the morning walks and morning explorations that Chris enjoys with our, we have this Prakriti, the environmental organization that kind of takes care of our environment at IIT Madras. So Chris knows the nook and corner of our forest. So he can also be part of that group exploration. And I should also thank Geeta and Nancy and who have been with us right from the beginning. And we always enjoyed this 1 week of food and festivities, which we are really missing. And I think hopefully you'll also enjoy the hospitality next time. We should also have to thank all the departments that supported us, Dean Students and Dean Alumni Affairs, and also Professor Sethupathi from Department of Physics, Professor Sriram Kumar, and Professor Umakant Dash from Humanities, and the Department of Humanities staff, Ms. Suguna and Mr. Sasi and others. And I should also thank Kamya, who is actually one of the best MS Master students. And also she did her PhD from University of Aarhus through our Erasmus Mundus program. And she did her postdoc at IIT Madras. Then she is now working at IIT Jodhpur as an assistant professor in the Department of Humanities and Social Sciences. And she has been one of the main drivers for Kenyan workshop here in India as well. And thanks to all the faculty, Nancy, Geeta Squared, then Wendy, John, Chris, Bob, and Yutan, and our excellent group of TAs. I hope all the participants will make use of this great opportunity because you will learn from the best and make the best use of it. Thank you very much. Kami will take over and then lead us to the next session. Thank you very much.